He's here. Now, broadcasting from the underground command post, deep in the bowels of a hidden bunker, somewhere under the brick and steel of a nondescript building, we've once again made contact with our leader, Mark Levin.
It's morning again in America. Today, more men and women will go to work than ever before in our country's history. With interest rates at about half the record highs of 1980, nearly 2,000 families today will buy new homes, more than at any time in the past 4 years. This afternoon, 6,500 young men and women will be married. And with inflation at less than half of what it was just 4 years ago, they can look forward with confidence to the future. It's morning again in America. And under the leadership of President Reagan, our country is prouder and stronger and better. Why would we ever want to return to where we were less than 4 short years ago?
In my lifetime, we've faced 2 world wars, a war in Korea, and then Vietnam. And I know this. I want our children never to have to face another. A president's most important job is to secure peace, not just now, but for the lifetimes of our children. But it takes a strong America to build a peace that lasts. And I believe with all my heart that working together, we have made America stronger and prouder and more secure today. And now we can work toward a lasting peace for our children and their children to come. Peace is the highest aspiration of the American people. Today, America is prepared for peace. We will negotiate for it, sacrifice for it. We will not surrender for it, now or ever.
So if somebody wants to build a coal-powered plant, they can. It's just that it will bankrupt them because they're going to be charged a huge sum for all that greenhouse gas that's being emitted. You know, when I was asked earlier about the issue of coal, under my plan of a cap-and-trade system, electricity rates would necessarily skyrocket. Even, regardless of what I say about whether coal is good or bad, because I'm capping greenhouse gases, coal-powered plants, natural gas, you name whatever the plants were, whatever the industry was, they would have to retrofit their operations. That will cost money. They will pass that money on to consumers.
Mark Levin here as we celebrate the 100th birthday of the great Ronald Reagan. Our number, 877-381-3811. 877-381-3811. Gee, you think there's a little difference between a great president and a very poor one? Reagan believed in this country. Reagan loved this country to its core. Reagan loved the people of this country. He loved liberty. He loved capitalism. He loved our history. He loved our founding fathers. He loved the Declaration and the Constitution. He was so proud of being the president of the greatest nation on the face of the earth. His chest was always out, his back always board stiff, never bowed to a soul. And he loved being president. And he wanted to make a difference. Not transform the society, but embrace it. Not drag this society in a direction it didn't want to go in, but to lead it. I'll tell you a little history. I have a great deal of experience working in the Reagan campaigns and in the Reagan administration. But in 1974, August of 1974, I believe, I was 15 years old. And I took that train ride to Philadelphia from just outside the city boundaries where I lived. I used to take this train into Philadelphia to go to Independence Hall to look at the building where Thomas Jefferson stayed and wrote the first draft of the Declaration of Independence. I would go to Independence Hall, and I would just stand there and stare. Stare at the chair that George Washington sat in. I wanted to know who stood where. I wanted to know if the inkwells and the spittoons were original. And the floorboards. I wanted to know about this sanctified ground. And I would walk down the street where Betsy Ross's house was. And I'd go around the corner where the first customs building was. And on and on and on. I just couldn't get enough of our great history. I've talked about this many times, and I've written about it many times. Right there in that one building. The Declaration of Independence was signed. Right there in that building. The Constitution was drafted and signed. On a wing of that building, which had been and was the Pennsylvania Assembly Building, Congress met for the first several years of the Republic. The lower house was actually where the House of Representatives met on the street floor. Then you would go upstairs and the Senate was up there. That's why they call it the upper house. Not because it's better, but because it was upstairs. It's a relatively small room in that building where the Supreme Court met. It's amazing. All right there. Then you'd go out front, and there were stone memorials, including one to Abraham Lincoln, who gave a speech in front of Independence Hall, and John Kennedy, who gave a speech in front of Independence Hall. The other side of the building was the Liberty Bell, with the big crack. Amazing. I'd walk a couple blocks. There was an old cemetery there where Benjamin Franklin was buried. And I could tell you so much more. But in August 1974, there was a man who was coming to Philadelphia to give a speech. And I was, even then, interested in conservatism and politics. So I took that train down to Philadelphia because I wanted to hear that man speak. I was 15 years old. And I recall my older brother Doug was with me. And I listened to him speak. And I was swept away. I'd never heard anything like this in my life. This man wasn't a politician. This man was a statesman. Oozing charisma. Plain spoken. A happy man. A decent, genuine human being. It was Ronald Reagan. From that moment, that speech, that August, 1974, I'd already been a very young conservative gentleman in terms of what I read and so forth. That sealed it. I worked in his campaign in 1976 in Pennsylvania, where they said he didn't have a chance. 1976. In the Republican primary. Running against the sitting president. Who does that? The establishment Republican Party in Pennsylvania is just that. It was a gutless, visionless party. Like so many of the Republican establishment parties along the East Coast and in New England. Republican leaders. My dad was with me on one occasion when they were telling us Reagan can't win in Pennsylvania. He's too conservative. Or Reagan's stupid. He's an actor. From Republicans. I ignored them. I loathed these losers, these Republicans who didn't want to win, these Republicans who didn't understand. They meant nothing to me. I was 17 at the time. The Reagan campaign had decided it didn't have that much in terms of resources, and they certainly couldn't expend a lot of money in the state of Pennsylvania, or as we called it, the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. But there were still a handful of young Turks that didn't much give a damn, and we still worked very, very hard to promote Reagan as a write-in candidate. I pretty much handled southeastern Pennsylvania. A bunch of my buddies handled other counties. Some were out there in Allegheny County, in Erie. We did everything we could. We lost, of course. Reagan almost won that primary, meaning the Republican primary. He almost defeated Gerald Ford. And at that convention, as is well known now, after Ford spoke, Reagan spoke. And after Reagan spoke, the delegates realized what a terrible mistake they had made. They nominated the wrong man for president. Ronald Reagan always fought the Republican establishment. He fought it in 1966 to get the Republican nomination for governor of California. He fought it in 1976, and he fought it again in 1980 against the Bush family, to be perfectly blunt about it. He was not an establishment Republican of any kind. He was a conservative. He was a right-winger. And when he lost in 1976, he made a little statement. I'm digging for it here, Mr. Producer. Maybe you can help. And he made a little statement at a little press conference. Here's what he said. Cut 3, go.
Sure, there's a disappointment in what happened, but the cause goes on. And don't get cynical. Don't get cynical, because look at yourselves and what you were willing to do, and recognize that there are millions and millions of Americans out there that want what you want, that want it to be that way, that want it to be a shining city on a hill.
On the plane going back, I went over and I had a convention ticket, and I asked him if he'd sign it as a souvenir. And what he wrote was, "We fought, we dreamed, and the dream is still with us." And looking back on it now, he never gave up. He just kept right on going. It was this incredible crushing defeat, and it didn't crush him. Just came back up, shook his head, and said, "Okay, what's next?" And that began the campaign for the year 1980.
Yep. He never said never. He was always underestimated. We're going to spend a lot of time on the great Ronald Reagan on this program today, and almost no time on Barack Obama. There's nothing new going on in Egypt, although there's something I want to say about it. And let me just preface it by saying this. I have concluded, although it's not a perfect distinction, but I have concluded that the old Reaganites, and I guess I'm one of them, and the Bush 43 guys, we don't see eye to eye on what's going on in Egypt. Now, don't get me wrong, there's some overlap. So I'm speaking generally. Reagan wanted democracy spread throughout the world, but not at the cost of defeating an ally. He wanted to see democracy spread in lieu of communism. He didn't look for fights among allies. He looked to destroy the Soviet Union. He looked to destroy the communist footholds in the Western Hemisphere. He looked to destroy communist satellites in Africa and other parts of the world. But he wasn't going around picking fights with allies who weren't democratic. He would have thought that was crazy. Hence his comments about the Shah of Iran that I've played the other day, and I'll play again. Democracy Project, Human Rights Project. The project is the American project. What's prudent? What's realistic? When we come back, more Ronald Reagan.
Mark Levin.
President, in talking about the continuing recession tonight, you have blamed mistakes of the past, and you have blamed the Congress. Does any of the blame belong to you?
Yes, because for many years I was a Democrat.
There you go. Solid as a rock and funny as hell. I met the gentleman several times, and he always had a good joke. But he always knew who he was, Barack Obama. He never looked back and said, you know, I'm Lincoln, I'm FDR. No, he was Ronald Reagan. We'll be right back.
Mark Levin, America's think tank. And you can call him at 877-381-3811.
There's a bear in the woods. For some people, the bear is easy to see. Others don't see it at all. Some people say the bear is tame. Others say it's vicious and dangerous. Since no one can really be sure who's right, isn't it smart to be as strong as the bear? If there is a bear.
This was America in 1980, held in contempt by foreign nations. Across the world, people were losing their freedoms. So many countries thought America had seen its day, but we knew better. So we stopped complaining together and started working together. Today, America is strong again. We're looking to the future with confidence and pride. America's best days and democracy's best days lie ahead.
And if there's any doubt whatsoever of Reagan's philosophy, then I'm going to remind you about his philosophy. If there is any doubt where he stood on government-run health care, I'm going to remind you where he stood on government-run health care. 1961, cut one, go.
Back in 1927, an American socialist, Norman Thomas, 6 times candidate for president on the Socialist Party ticket, said the American people would never vote for socialism. But he said under the name of liberalism, the American people will adopt every fragment of the socialist program.
You say that today, there are certain people who try to dismiss you. And yet they say they long for the days of Ronald Reagan. That's 50 years ago, ladies and gentlemen. And since then, the country has gone much further left, and today it's lurching left. I don't mean the people. I mean the government. I mean the establishment. What would they have said about Ronald Reagan after Tucson? What do you think Reagan would have said about the Tea Party movement? Mike Reagan was on here last week. He told you he would have loved it. Because Ronald Reagan is the founding father of the Tea Party movement. Here's Reagan in 1964, October 27, on self-government. Cut 2, go.
And this idea that government is beholden to the people, that it has no other source of power except the sovereign people, is still the newest and the most unique idea in all the long history of man's relation to man. This is the issue of this election. Whether we believe in our capacity for self-government or whether we abandon the American Revolution and confess that a little intellectual elite in a far distant capital can plan our lives for us better than we can plan them ourselves. You and I are told increasingly we have to choose between a left or right. Well, I'd like to suggest there is no such thing as a left or right. There's only an up or down. Man's old age dream, the ultimate in individual freedom consistent with law and order, or down to the ant-heap of totalitarianism. And regardless of their sincerity, their humanitarian motives, those who would trade our freedom for security have embarked on this downward course.
Mm-hmm. One more, because I know you all want to get involved in this. By the way, does this man not inspire you? Do you not well up a little bit when you hear him? Do you not miss him? Those of you who've never heard him before, young folks, you've never heard a president speak like this before, have you? Who understood right and wrong, good and bad, and who was unequivocal about his love of this country. And he put out a warning, excuse me, he put out a warning, and he put this warning out many times, and as a matter of fact, it is the absolute last paragraph in my book, Liberty and Tyranny. Because I remember when he said it. Reagan's Ludwig von Mises Memorial Lecture at the great Hillsdale College, November 10, 1977, 1 year after he lost, a little over a year after he lost to Gerald Ford in the Republican primary. These are words to never forget. Cut 4, go.
Freedom is something that cannot be passed on in the bloodstream or genetically. And it's never more than one generation away from extinction. Every generation has to learn how to protect and defend it, or it's gone, and gone for a long, long time. Already, many of us, particularly those in business and industry, there are too many who have switched rather than fight. And it's time that particularly some of our corporations learn that when you get in bed with government, you're going to get more than a good night's sleep.
Well, he added that line, but see, we conservatives, we're not corporatists. We're free market advocates. We believe business in whatever form, legal form being a corporation or small businesses or people operating on their own out of their basements or people who work for small, large, medium-sized businesses. We believe in commerce. That was his point. And these corporations that throw in with the government, and we know who they are, these crony capitalists, are really setting the stage for their own destruction. Now, he also warned if you allow your freedom to be taken away from you in whatever form, whatever program, you're not likely to get it back. That's why we fight the way we do, ladies and gentlemen, on government-run health care. Did you know the conservative legal movement began in the mid-1970s? Really, the early to mid-1970s. Some of the same men who got behind Ronald Reagan for governor in 1966 and later for president in 68 and then 76 were some of the same men who backed some of the conservative legal foundations that exist today, including the one that I run, Landmark Legal Foundation. Great men. Like Joe Coors, Tuttle, so many others. These were men who didn't have to work another day in their lives. These were men who didn't have to draw attention to themselves. But men like Reagan who were completely committed to the future of this country. And we have those people today. And there are many, many of them, and I can't name them all, but look at the way they're attacking the Koch brothers. Those vile, disgusting, common cause petitioners and rabble-rousers. We play that audio about how they want to hang certain Supreme Court justices. A lot of good men and women out there who are doing a lot of good things. But I want you to get a sense of this man. And I'm going to spend a lot of time on this during the program. As a matter of fact, we have scheduled at the top of the next hour former Attorney General, former counselor to President Reagan, former legal counsel to Governor Reagan, Ed Meese, my former boss and my beloved dear friend. I don't know of anybody in public life who was any closer to Ronald Reagan than Ed Meese. But you can see the seriousness of this man, and yet the humility. It's true what they say. Ronald Reagan never removed his tie or his jacket in the Oval Office. Period. He had absolute respect for the office of the presidency. And you won't find any photos where he did. And Ronald Reagan was more than that. There are stories I can't even tell you, to be honest with you, because I was a witness to it, but it involved other people. And he was an extremely giving human being. Particularly the people who worked for him. Well, I'll tell you this story. Hope it doesn't get me in trouble. When Attorney General Meese, in his final meeting as Attorney General with President Reagan, they were in the Oval Office, and I was there too, as were a few other people. And Meese decided he was going to leave so as not to harm the presidential chances of George Bush. Turned out to be President Bush 41. Meese had been viciously attacked. When I was in the Oval Office there, Ronald Reagan looked at Ed Meese and Ursula Meese, and he said, I want you to know something. All those attacks on you, he said, they were intended for me. And I cannot tell you how sorry I am that you and your family have had to go through all these vicious smears and attacks on my behalf. He knew. He knew they were out to get him. He also knew that people were out to get his closest aides. You know, there's a lot of rewriting of history going on here. There are endless investigations by independent counsel triggered by Democrat members of Congress. There were endless oversight hearings that had nothing to do with oversight by political hacks in Congress who were trying to criminalize what was going on in the Reagan administration. And I might as well address this issue because liberals are out there grinding their teeth because they're largely ignorant. Iran-Contra. I'll address that after we come back after this magnificent suggestion to you about pro-flowers. When you're in love, people do things for each other without expecting anything in return, such as picking up the other person's dry cleaning, or getting up to let the dog out when it's not your turn, or not making a big deal of something. Well, Valentine's Day's coming up, so why not make a big deal out of telling your wife, your sweetheart, your mother, your daughter that they are a big deal? Take action right now, today, and tell that person how much you appreciate them with 100 blooms of love. That's right, 100 blooms of love. They're beautiful. They smell great. Plus, you can get a free glass vase. You want to know how much it is? It's only $19.99. Only radio listeners can get this exclusive upgrade. Now, you can add chocolates, a teddy bear, and a lavender bath kit for only $10 more. Imagine the look on her face when she sees this huge bouquet with all the extras. And if you haven't tried ProFlowers before, what are you waiting for? You can't lose. These blooms are guaranteed to stay fresh for at least 7 days, and they're guaranteed to be delivered on Valentine's. Perfect. This amazing deal expires today. I said it expires today. So don't wait to place your order. Here's the only way to get this incredible 100 blooms of love offer. Call 800-PRO-FLOWERS and mention Mark. That's 800-PRO-FLOWERS and mention Mark. If you're in your car, boom, do it right now. Or go to proflowers.com, click on the microphone in the top right corner, and type in Mark. That's proflowers.com. Click on the microphone. Make sure you type in Mark. Don't wait. This offer expires today. So order right now.
Mark Levin.
We are in the fourth day of a President of the United States violating a federal court order and his administration violating a federal court order, and nobody gives a damn. We're in the fourth day of a constitutional crisis, and nobody gives a damn. Now, Iran-Contra. Listen to me as you've never listened to me before, because this is what the left throws up. Not a single person was criminally charged with sending weapons to the Iranians. Not one. Not a single person was criminally charged with taking the proceeds from that transaction to fund the freedom fighters in Nicaragua. Not one. Do you want to know why? Because they weren't crimes. You can argue over the policy. You can argue over who was in charge of what. But what you cannot say is that it was a crime. Unlike the intentional obstruction of a federal judge in Pensacola, Florida. But I want to give you an example of how the prosecutor in that case, Lawrence Walsh, behaved. The late, great Cap Weinberger. Walsh waited until a few days before the election between Bush and Clinton to bring his charges. I believe it was the Friday before the Tuesday. To bring his charges. Because he wanted to defeat George Bush. Because he hated Reagan, he hated Bush, and he hated the Reagan administration. And when we come back, I want to tell you the main thing they accuse Casper Weinberger of, so you have those facts too. We'll be right back. Casper Weinberger. These subpoenas, by the way, were massive. I know, because while at the Justice Department, I had to deal with the subpoenas coming into our department from the prosecutor. And also, when I left the government, I and Landmark Legal, we represented former Attorney General Meese, who, by the way, was charged with anything, of course. What Weinberger's people did is they took Now, the requests were so overwhelming, to go into the Pentagon or the Justice Department and say, we want all the documents that say this, that, or the other. You got to dig them up and find them. And well, they turned some of the documents over to the Library of Congress, and those documents were put in the secure or confidential section of the Library of Congress. But Walsh said that was done in that case to obstruct his investigation. In other words, turning documents over to the Library of Congress, not destroying them, turning them over. Not even trying to defy a subpoena was obstruction. So he charged him for that. Now, one other thing you should know about Mr. Walsh in this case, the independent counsel who went on for 8 years. We have some rules over there at the Justice Department, at least we did when I was chief of staff, that when you have access to intelligence information, there are certain ways to secure it, certain ways to transport it. So while Lawrence Walsh was on an airplane going out to California to interview President Reagan, he had all this top-secret information, code black intelligence information, in a suitcase. And he checked it with the other baggage. And when he landed in California, the suitcase never came out the other end. For 2 weeks, Walsh kept it secret. The FBI was called in. They couldn't find the suitcase either. And guess what, ladies and gentlemen? The suitcase was never found. It's still missing. We'll be right back.
He's here. Now, broadcasting from the underground command post, deep in the bowels of a hidden bunker, somewhere under the brick and steel of a nondescript building, we've once again made contact with our leader, Mark Levin.
It's morning again in America. Today, more men and women will go to work than ever before in our country's history. With interest rates at about half the record highs of 1980, nearly 2,000 families today will buy new homes, more than at any time in the past 4 years. This afternoon, 6,500 young men and women will be married. And with inflation at less than half of what it was just 4 years ago, they can look forward with confidence to the future. It's morning again in America. And under the leadership of President Reagan, our country is prouder and stronger and better. Why would we ever want to return to where we were less than 4 short years ago?
In my lifetime, we've faced 2 world wars, a war in Korea, and then Vietnam. And I know this. I want our children never to have to face another. A president's most important job is to secure peace, not just now, but for the lifetimes of our children. But it takes a strong America to build a peace that lasts. And I believe with all my heart that working together, we have made America stronger and prouder and more secure today. And now we can work toward a lasting peace for our children and their children to come. Peace is the highest aspiration of the American people. Today, America is prepared for peace. We will negotiate for it, sacrifice for it. We will not surrender for it, now or ever.
This is Mark Levin. That was the great Ronald Reagan. Our number 877-381-3811. The 100th anniversary of Ronald Reagan's birth is Sunday, and I could not possibly do this program without having my mentor, my dear, dear friend, who was so pivotal in so much of what Ronald Reagan did, Ed Meese. How are you, Ed Meese?
I'm fine, Mark. Good to talk to you and to your listeners.
It's a pleasure. I would like to ask you a few questions.
Sure.
You're out there now at the Reagan Library, about to go there. And, by the way, say hi to my kids. They're going to be out there, too, if you don't mind.
Good. I'll look forward to seeing them.
I wanted to ask you something. When did you first meet Ronald Reagan?
It was in December of 1966. He had just won the election, and I had been asked if I would come up to Sacramento. I was, at that time, practicing law in Oakland, California. I was in the district attorney's office there, and I was asked if I would come up and meet the governor-elect. And I did, and I had, at that time, had never met with him or knew any. I knew a lot about him, of course, because he just won the election. But we talked. He talked to me for about a half hour. We talked about criminal justice, which is the field that I was in at the time. He asked me to be his legal affairs secretary at the end of that half hour, and I accepted on the spot, something I was surprised that I had done. But I was so impressed with him, how much he knew about my field, and how our ideas coincided that I looked forward to the chance to work for him.
Now, you didn't just come to his attention. You were pretty well known there with all these activities going on these campuses, these riots, and taking over different buildings and so forth. You helped develop a legal strategy for trying to deal with these campuses, didn't you?
Well, that's right. I was doing that for the district attorney's office, and I'd been involved in a number of the incidents, advising the police officers who were maintaining law and order at Berkeley particularly, and also in some of the demonstrations in the surrounding areas.
So you went to work for him, and early on, what did you think about what you'd done?
Well, I was tremendously impressed with him. He was very knowledgeable, a great person to talk to, a great leader, and I was really pleased that I'd made the decision to go to work for him.
Now, you stayed with him a very long time, didn't you?
Well, actually, it was 30 years, a little over 30 years from the time that I first met him and started work until he went into total seclusion, which was in the end of the 1990s.
Yeah.
And during that time, I'd worked for him, of course. I'd been his legal affairs secretary. Then I was chief of staff for him for the rest of. So I was with him the whole time he was governor. And then I served as the general counsel for his political action committee. Worked in the two campaigns in 1976 and then in 1980, and then worked in the White House, and then ultimately got into the Justice Department when he appointed me Attorney General, and of course that's when you and I worked together.
Well, now, one of the things I want to talk about was when you were Attorney General and your desire to ensure that the United States Constitution would be complied with. And you decided to advance the case that it was high time that the legal establishment, the legal bureaucracy, that the courts look at the Constitution and actually try to comply with it, rather than this living and breathing stuff and so forth. And we call it originalism today. Tell us how that all came about.
Well, actually, that was another idea that really originated with Ronald Reagan. He'd been very much concerned about what we call judicial activism, where judges would substitute their own ideas or their own political doctrines or policy preferences for what the Constitution and the statutes enacted by Congress actually said. And in other words, they departed from the Constitution, and that's where this idea of originalism goes. It comes from the idea that we want to actually follow the Constitution itself, not what a bunch of judges who were not complying with it were actually saying. And that was an idea of the president's. It caused him to be very much involved personally in the appointment of judges, and also this was kind of a direction to the department. And so I had the opportunity to speak to the American Bar Association at their annual meeting, and we laid out this strategy for returning to the Constitution at that meeting. And that was in June of 1985.
And needless to say, some people didn't very much like the idea, including at least one Supreme Court justice, right?
Well, that's right. There was a lot of opposition from the left and from some of those judges who I think felt that maybe this was being aimed at them and what they had done. And so we had a judge picked up on this, justice, and debated the thing. And Justice Brennan gave a talk at one of the law schools in Washington, and he took the other side, tried to minimize the importance of the Constitution, and so a debate broke out from that. And as a result, the Federalist Society, which was a group of lawyers and law students, wrote about the debate, published my original speech, published the justice's speech, and then the fight was on.
And the fight still goes on. And yet what's interesting to me is if you don't take an originalist approach, that is try to determine what was intended by the framers in the language that was used at the time, then what do you have? I mean, if the Constitution is to be framed in current thought and language, and it's a political expedient. So I honestly don't even understand the other side's position.
Well, you're absolutely right, Mark. If you had a contract, for example, with somebody, and one of the parties said, well, I don't care what the contract says, I want to do it my way, that's exactly what we have here when judges depart from the Constitution and substitute their own ideas of what they think it ought to read.
What do you think Ronald Reagan would say about the Tea Party movement?
I think he'd be very much interested in it, very much supportive, and I think he'd be very, very pleased that people are actually reading the Constitution and talking about the Constitution and comparing what Congress does, for example, as well as the courts, but particularly Congress, what the laws they pass, how closely that does or doesn't comply with what the Constitution actually says. He was a great student of the founding, as you know, believes thoroughly in what the original people who had founded our country had in mind, and I think he would be very proud that we were returning, at least to a greater extent than it has been in the past several decades, to people actually reading the Constitution.
What do you think Ronald Reagan would say? Look, I'm just asking you because you work so closely with him for so long. What do you think he'd say about the kind of policies that are being promoted by this president and what was formerly the Democrat Congress? They control the Senate now. What do you think he'd say about that?
Well, I think he would be appalled at the way in which the current administration is intruding into the freedom of the people and the way in which they are trying to expand the power of the federal government. He was a great believer in federalism, on the role of the states as the founders already had originally intended, and I think he would be very much concerned about the direction in which this country has been going, and I think he would have been gratified by the fact that the people were in effect rising up to try to return to the Constitution.
I'll bet he'd have a good laugh that probably the most radical president in modern times invokes his name.
Well, that's right. You know, it's interesting, Mark. I think you and I both are very gratified that Ronald Reagan is now the standard by which other presidents are measured, but more particularly in the last debate by both parties in 2008, prior to the election in the presidential debates, Ronald Reagan was the president most referred to by both parties as they discussed what a new president ought to be like.
Mm-hmm. Well, Ed Meese, first of all, I want to thank you publicly for all your service to this country. I mean, we even have judges on the bench now. You were crucial in advocating for them and encouraging their appointment. And they're still out there doing a magnificent job. You're still active as can be with the Heritage Foundation and other groups. You sit on the Landmark Legal Foundation's board. I just want to thank you very, very much, and have a good time out there.
Well, I sure will, Mark, and I want to thank you. You've been a very important part of our team, and your book on the Supreme Court and your book, Tyranny and Liberty, these things have been very important contributors to what I know Ronald Reagan would like to have happen in this country.
Well, God bless you, and my best to your family, too. So.
Thank you.
All right, take care. I can tell he has a cold, but this is a great man. But like all great men, the liberals always try to smear and destroy. Because that's what liberals do, smear and destroy. Ed Meese is a very modest man. He's a very humble man. He was Ronald Reagan's, certainly one of his closest advisors for his entire, almost throughout his governorship. Well, I think it was throughout his governorship and throughout his presidency. And he would turn to Ed Meese all the time for specific assistance when it was needed, to get information and to help go through the information and to figure out, because an administration is big, who was doing what. And Reagan was a wonderful person to work for because he would delegate authority and would actually let you do what he thought you were supposed to do. All right, folks, that was Edwin Meese. We'll be right back.
Mark Levin.
In this present crisis, government is not the solution to our problem. Government is the problem. From time to time, we've been tempted to believe that society has become too complex to be managed by self-rule, that government by an elite group is superior to government for, by, and of the people. Well, if no one among us is capable of governing himself, then who among us has the capacity to govern someone else? We are a nation that has a government, not the other way around. And this makes us special among the nations of the earth. Our government has no power except that granted it by the people. It is time to check and reverse the growth of government, which shows signs of having grown beyond the consent of the governed. It is my intention to curb the size and influence of the federal establishment and to demand recognition of the distinction between the powers granted to the federal government and those reserved to the states or to the people. All of us need to be reminded that the federal government did not create the states. The states created the federal government.
Absolute genius and a ton of guts. Who talks like this today? Well, there are a handful. There are a handful. Michelle Bachmann talks like this. Sarah Palin talks like this. There are many others, too. I just can't remember everybody. But not enough. Absolutely not enough. Friend of mine, and you would know who it is, but I'm not going to reveal her, running around saying, this guy's great. He's from a blue state, but he's really great. I wrote back, I said, he's bad on guns. He's bad on the mosque issue, ground zero. He's bad on the environment. He campaigned for rhinos. And I went on, but he's good on spending, the person said. That's why he's not qualified to be president, because he's not good enough. We'll be right back.
The Mark Levin Show, where the Reagan Coalition meets every day. Call now, 877-381-3811.
A couple of passing observations. You see all the news video and audio of what's going on in Egypt? See all of it? There's tons of it. And yet 2 years ago, when there was an uprising in Iran, or a year and a half ago, there wasn't very much at all. What we were getting were cell phone images. That's one big difference between those two countries. One is totalitarian and one is authoritarian. And I'm getting into this for a reason as we talk about Ronald Reagan with his 100th anniversary of his birthday coming on Sunday. There is a great piece by my buddy Michael Ledeen in pajamasmedia.com. We will link to this on my social sites and on marklevinshow.com. Ledeen's a Reaganite. And he writes, we've had many alliances with friendly tyrants, from Stalin to Papa Doc, from Mubarak to Pinochet, from the Shah to the Saudi royal family. It's not an easy embrace. If you're the American president, you know or should know that it's only a matter of time before the American people, or at least a big chunk of public opinion, turn against the tyrant and demand that we support his domestic enemies, real and imagined. You don't want that, since you know that in the ensuing political free-for-all, you will be stained with the same spray of slime that besmirches the tyrants. On the other hand, if you pull the plug on the tyrant, you send two very dangerous messages. You tell all our allies that we're weak and unreliable, which discourages them, along with all the would-be friends and allies who are trying to figure out what to do, and you tell all our enemies that we are weak and we will run at the first sign of trouble. For extras, if the abandoned tyrant should win, he won't be a great friend of ours again. That's a bad parlay. Many people are now saying that it is always wrong for America to support dictators. Always, Ledeen writes, is too much. Was it wrong to join the Soviets in the war against the Axis? Would it have been better to sacrifice thousands of American lives in order to avoid the moral stain on our standard? Are tactics to be trashed in favor of a single strategy? As I keep saying, we are often compelled to choose between various evils, and it is a legitimate choice. It's the way the world generally works, in fact. It's rare to have a fully attractive and morally impeccable option. Plus, while tyrants are contrary to our national DNA, there are dictators and there are dictators. Some can be convinced to democratize, and those chances are increased if they trust us and are willing to work with us. One way to get from dictatorship to democracy, and that is our national mission, is to get friendly tyrants to liberalize their policies. Peaceful transitions have been accomplished, and by the way, in societies that were widely believed to be intrinsically, almost genetically, authoritarian. Take two, Taiwan and Spain, both of which democratized from the top down. Tyrants don't like this process at all, obviously. It drains their power and may even cost them their job. And they worry about darker consequences, like standing trial for various criminal acts from repression to corruption. That's why Franco laid the groundwork for democracy, but left the actual process to his successors. But the Taiwanese actually did it. The ruling party created a system that was guaranteed to remove the party from power, perhaps only temporarily, but perhaps for a long time. It could not have happened without the American help and perhaps, I don't know this, I only suspect it, promises of safe haven if things got very bad. Ledeen says, we should have insisted that the Shah liberalize Iran. Yes, I know he did some of it. And I know that Iran was, by orders of magnitude, the most liberal and open society in the Muslim Middle East. But he stopped that process in its tracks, thereby provoking the insurrection that produced the Islamic Revolution. We should have insisted that Mubarak liberalize Egypt. Every now and then an American president or Secretary of State said so, but then we backed off. Now we have a serious crisis with no good solution. What to do? Ledeen says, I think the answer is obvious. We have to stick with Mubarak all the way down if he is indeed going down. We can talk about reform as much as we wish, but it's as crazy to try and institute reform in the middle of an insurrection as it is to raise taxes in the middle of a depression. But we have to say above all privately that we're with him, and that we want serious change in the future. We will not abandon him. That is the right policy, even if Mubarak goes down. If we do that, we can say to his successors, quote, we were loyal to him because he was a good ally, and we do not abandon loyal allies. If you're good allies, we will be loyal to you too, even at your darkest hour. If we bail, then both our allies, other allies, and Mubarak's successors will know that America is not loyal, cannot be relied upon, and thus that it is a mistake to cater to America's wishes about democracy, for example. So as history unfolds through paradoxes, We have identified another one. If you really want to advance democracy, it will sometimes be necessary to stand foursquare behind a dictator. If we had pursued our national mission for the past many decades, we might have avoided the necessity of doing this unpleasant thing. But here we are. If we jump ship now, as it seems we are, it is odds on to make things worse. Michael Ledeen, The Problem of the Friendly Tyrant. And I believe he echoes what Reagan said about the Shah of Iran. And we'll play that one last time, just to remind you. Cut 11, go.
I did criticize the president because of our undercutting of what was a stalwart ally, the Shah of Iran. And I am not at all convinced that he was that far out of line with his people, or that they wanted that to happen. The Shah had done our bidding and carried our load in the Middle East for quite some time. And I did think that it was a blot on our record that we let him down. Have things gotten better? The Shah, whatever he might have done, was building low-cost housing, had taken land away from the mullahs and was distributing it to the peasants so they could be landowners, things of that kind. But we turned it over to a maniacal fanatic who has slaughtered thousands and thousands of people, calling it executions.
And Reagan was a very realistic man, principled and realistic. You treat an ally one way, even though you may not like their government and their tactics, and you treat an enemy a different way. The enemy you want to see crumble. The enemy you do want to see an uprising in their midst. Here is Reagan, January 26, 1982, State of the Union speech about the Soviets. Cut 8, go.
Building a more peaceful world requires a sound strategy and the national resolve to back it up. When radical forces threaten our friends, when economic misfortune creates conditions of instability, when strategically vital parts of the world fall under the shadow of Soviet power, our response can make the difference between peaceful change or disorder and violence. That's why we've laid such stress not only on our own defense, but on our vital foreign assistance program. Your recent passage of the Foreign Assistance Act sent a signal to the world that America will not shrink from making the investments necessary for both peace and security. Our foreign policy must be rooted in realism, not naivete or self-delusion. A recognition of what the Soviet Empire is about is the starting point.
Okay,
Winston
stop
Churchill
there. A recognition about what the Islamic Nazis are about is a good starting point, too. That is an enemy that is an existential enemy. In other words, our very survival is at stake. And should they get control of nuclear weapons or biological weapons, or have the capacity to build them by taking over a third world country, but a relatively, I know this sounds oxymoronic, but a relatively advanced third world country as far as third world countries go, such as Egypt, that is a direct threat to the United States of America. To throw ourselves into the breach and to say, hurry up, whatever's going to happen, hurry up and happen. And then from the sidelines, to encourage an organization that was established in 1928, the Muslim Brotherhood, established in order to destroy an ally of the Third Reich, to tell them to embrace peace and democracy is as absurd as anything I've ever heard. Let me ask you this question. If you today, an American, had to choose between Hosni Mubarak and the Muslim Brotherhood, which spawned Al-Qaeda, which includes Hamas, which would you pick as an American concerned about American security? Exactly. It's not even a close call. So what those who are claiming that this is a democracy movement, and pray to God it is, What they don't want to discuss is what if it's not. What they won't tell us is what do we do if it doesn't turn out well. Which is most likely, let's be honest. We'll see. This is why Reagan felt you treat enemies one way and you treat allies another. You don't try and topple or encourage the toppling of an ally, but you work like hell to topple an enemy. And when you topple that enemy, yes, we would like that enemy replaced with a form of democratic government. By the way, when I say democratic government, when I speak about the United States, I'm well aware we're not a democracy. I'm well aware we're a republic. But these are terms I shouldn't have to explain over and over again. So, some have said this is the Berlin Wall moment in Egypt. I'm thinking, you've got your country screwed up. You've got your alliances screwed up. But when we come back, we will hear that Berlin Wall moment from the man himself, Ronald Reagan, when he was doing everything possible to put a dagger into the heart of the center of communism. And that threat today is in the form of Islamo-Nazism. And by the way, still some communism. In the form of Red China. But what do you think about a president of the United States who reaches out to the Muslim Brotherhood? He tells the American people that our policy is to spread universal values. Well, which value exactly are we spreading when we reach out to the Muslim Brotherhood? Oh, we're told that's realpolitik because they may take over. And yet it's not realpolitik in dealing with Mubarak. From him we demand democracy. From the Muslim Brotherhood we demand something they can never give us. Civility. Humanity. Peace. Carbonite, if you're taking the risk of not backing up your important computer files like your family photos or music, financial records, contact lists, odds are you're going to lose it all. Don't take that chance. Back up your files with Carbonite Online Backup. Carbonite is easy. Takes just minutes to get started. And it's automatic. Carbonite automatically backs up the files on your PC or Mac whenever you're connected to the Internet. It's also affordable. Less than $5 a month. Just $55 a year for unlimited backup. Plus, get anytime, anywhere access to your backed up files from any computer or from your smartphone with a free Carbonite cap. I have Carbonite on all my computers. We all sit in front of these machines. We load tons of information into them. You lose that information, you've lost all that labor, all the resources, all the time that you have spent downloading, linking, and saving information and data. So why do that? If you're driving right now, as soon as you get home, go to Carbonite.com and use my offer code MARK for this special offer. A 15-day free trial plus 2 months free with your subscription. So that's Carbonite.com, and be sure to enter my offer code MARK.
Mark Levin.
Back to that Brandenburg Gate. Here's Reagan, June 12, 1987. Go.
Today I say, as long as this gate is closed, as long as this scar of a wall is permitted to stand, it is not the German question alone that remains open, but the question of freedom for all mankind. In the 1950s, Khrushchev predicted, "We will bury you." But in the West today, we see a free world that has achieved a level of prosperity and well-being unprecedented in all human history. In the communist world, we see failure. There is one sign the Soviets can make that would be unmistakable, that would advance dramatically the cause of freedom and peace. General Secretary Gorbachev, if you seek peace, if you seek prosperity for the Soviet Union and Eastern Europe, if you seek liberalization, come here to this gate. Mr. Gorbachev, open this gate. Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall.
You know, as I listen to that, it is amazing how desperate subsequent presidents have wanted to find their Brandenburg Gate moment, is it not? This is really what Obama means when he says he feels some kinship to Reagan. That is, he's looking for that moment. He went to Germany and he spoke, and they wanted you to believe it was his Brandenburg Gate moment. It wasn't. He went to Cairo and he spoke. They wanted you to believe it was another moment. Moment of despair. We'll be right back.
I received an invitation that said, please come to Ellis Island July 4th for the 100th birthday celebration of an American institution. Somebody goofed. My birthday isn't until February. And it really won't be my 100th. Although I've been around for a while. I can remember when a hot story broke and the reporters would run in yelling, "Stop the chisels."
All right, ladies and gentlemen, let us take our first call, shall we? Alex in San Francisco, the great KSFO, a Democrat. Go.
Yeah, my God, are you going to go to bed tonight with a picture of him under your pillow?
No. I'm going to have a picture of Obama on my ceiling. I always have to stare at the Messiah, you know. You have a question, or should I cut you off like the miscreant that you are?
Yeah, you did last time. You didn't let...
All right, we're going to cut you off again. You haven't asked the question. You're just a punk. Here was his question that he can never get out because he's got to take his shot. If Reagan was so great, why did he raise taxes? Now, ladies and gentlemen, Reagan cut taxes far more deeply and broadly than he ever raised them. But I've explained this many times. But it's like explaining everything else to the left. They're incoherent. They're drones. They're haters. Reagan cut a deal with the liberal Democrats. And the deal was, for every dollar he would increase taxes, they would cut spending by 2. They raised taxes and they never cut spending. At around the same time, he cut another deal with them. That was that there'd be about 2 million illegal aliens, 2.3 million. He would give them amnesty if they would appropriate the funds to secure the border. Alan Simpson was involved in that, the guy running around now putting down everybody else. And the Democrats, of course, went for the amnesty and never helped secure the border. I know these things because I watched. I was in the government watching these things. So it's not like Reagan said, hey, I'm going to raise taxes on everybody. Come on, spread the wealth. Kill the rich. He cut a deal, and he never cut one again. We'll be right back.
He's here. Now, broadcasting from the underground command post, deep in the bowels of a hidden bunker, somewhere under the brick and steel of a nondescript building, we've once again made contact with our leader, Mark Levin.
Hello, my friends. Hour 3, Mark Levin here. Our number, 877-381-3811. 877-381-3811. Well, the liberal puke, Alex from San Francisco, he's tired of all this Reagan stuff. Now, we should keep talking about Obama every day, day in and out, day out, 24/7. Obama should be our world. You know, it's funny. Rush and I were instant messaging back and forth earlier this morning, and I said, it is so depressing talking about Obama because everything he does is so damn depressing. I'll give you an example. Here we are on the Drudge Report, the homepage. Gallup. Unemployment is actually 9.9%, underemployment at 19.2%. You can't believe the government's figures. Or you flunk math. You create 36,000 new jobs and unemployment drops to 9%. Nobody believes that. Isn't it funny also that the numbers that this administration spits out are always curious, troublesome? That's because the left is playing with the bureaucracy, and the bureaucracy is being politicized. So now we have Gallup, a private entity that does polling through its scientific models, or its statistical models, I should say, telling us unemployment is basically 10%, underemployment is basically over 19%. Underemployment meaning people dropping out, people taking part-time work, or people who want full-time jobs, who haven't dropped out, who can't find jobs. This is 2 years after Obama's been president. The Democrats ran Congress. They massively spent the society into the equivalent of bankruptcy. And their propagandists in the media are still out there talking about the recovery that's been going on for a year and a half. You got to be out of your mind with this kind of propaganda. I feel like we live in the third world with this crap. Labor force participation plunges to a 26-year low. Do you know what that means? That's why we have record numbers of people on food stamps. 43.6 million. That's why we have record numbers of people on unemployment insurance. Extending for a record amount of time. That is why we have people without health care. Not because of insurance companies. They don't have jobs. And that's why people are losing their homes. I mean, this socialism doesn't work. It's destructive. It's a disaster. And this crowd comes into office and intentionally uses a recession to, quote-unquote, transform our society. Nobody used to talk about transforming our society. The word transformation came into office with this president. Fuel prices are starting to go up. Have you noticed? Of course. There are blackouts and brownouts all over this country. And not just due to the weather. Mr. Producer, get those two cuts back, will you, where he's talking about coal and electricity, will you? And let me know when you have them ready. We have, as a designed policy of this administration, to choke off our energy supplies. Over there at the Interior Department, the Assistant Secretary for Widgets and other crap, you know what he said? Just said it. We're not issuing permits for deep water drilling because none of the oil companies have demonstrated that they can do it safely enough. So we've known this all along. It's a de facto moratorium. They've been held in contempt by a federal judge, and they could care less. Meanwhile, day in, day out, Egypt, that's fine. It's an important story. We have a president that doesn't follow the law. Day 4. Day 4 of the president defying the federal judge in Pensacola, Florida. Day 4. And it won't be covered at all. Yeah, let's talk more about Obama, right, Alex? Out there in La La Land? Yeah, we can do it. Underemployment, unemployment, people dropping out, 19.2%. That's Depression-era misery. Despite all the... if they took all this money and handed everybody a check, we'd be out of this already. But they don't want us out of this. They're using our tax dollars to grease the skids for their buddies, whether they're massive corporations, whether they're unions, whether they're individuals, whatever the hell. Oh, and here's some good news. The head of the TSA, well, he's announced that the TSA, for certain purposes, can unionize. New York Slimes, seeking to end a debate that has brewed for nearly a decade. You want to hear more Obama? This is Obama. The director of the Transportation Security Administration announced today that a union would be allowed to bargain over working conditions on behalf of the nation's 45,000 airport security officers. This president and his hacks, who are laced throughout the administration, are moving as fast as they can to put their fingerprints all over this government. We, the consumer, should be represented by a union when we go to these damn airports. They're on the move, baby. Oh, and Shell has decided they're not going to drill this year in Alaska at the Beaufort Sea. They have exploratory wells there, but they're not going to drill. You know why? Because the Interior Department's blocking them, and they've had enough. They said they'll take another look next year. They've already poured several billions of dollars, $3 billion in exploration since 2005. They can't drill a damn well and use it. But don't worry, Obama at his State of the Union address said the issue is raising taxes on the oil companies. That's how we'll get more money. More money for what? Let them drill, for God's sakes. Let the coal companies mine, for God's sakes. We need electricity. We need natural gas. We need crude oil. Those of you without jobs, or those of you in fear of losing your jobs, this is all connected. That's how a major economy works. You choke off energy supplies, you kill jobs. You increase taxes, you kill jobs. You unleash all these regulations, you kill jobs. But don't worry, if you're a public employee in the bureaucracy, you're going to get unions, you're going to get pensions, you're going to get health care, you're going to get tenure, you're going to have civil service protection. Nobody can touch you. Nobody can touch you. In the private sector, different story. Yes, let's talk about Obama. More Obama, ladies and gentlemen. Yeah. That'll bring you down, won't it? And look at this Drudge Report. The Daily Telegraph, England, WikiLeaks cables. The United States secretly agreed to give the Russians sensitive information on Britain's nuclear deterrent to persuade them to sign a key treaty, the Daily Telegraph can disclose. HMS Vanguard is Britain's lead Trident armed submarine. The U.S., under a nuclear deal, has agreed to give the Kremlin the serial numbers of the missiles it gives to Britain. And Britain didn't improve. Yeah, let's keep talking about that. I can't wait. One day Obama won't be president. He'll be retired. They'll have a library there. The Obama Library. We'll have a special wing. There'll be a special wing there reaching out to Muslims only, with the Cairo speech. I even think they'll have his long-form birth certificate there, maybe framed, hanging on the wall. There it is, finally, there it is. Anyway, right next to Harry Reid. Mr. Producer, have we found Harry Reid's long-form birth certificate yet? Still looking. We need a searchlight to find it. Oh, yeah, we'll have the Obama Museum. It'll be there. All the great Obama achievements. Well, we can't have that because that'd be a telephone booth. Well, what would we have in the Obama Museum? I'm starting to think there can't be an Obama Museum. There are no highlights in this administration. None domestically, none in foreign policy, nothing. Well, maybe we can have, like, a basketball court, because I know he loves playing basketball. Maybe it can also be built in a country club with a golf course. He likes to play golf. Maybe there'll be a little concert section where all the Hollywood types can show up, because I know he likes to have concerts over there at the White House. Cafeteria. They'll serve cheeseburgers. They'll have a special smoking section there, because we know he likes to smoke. But then what? What of substance will we have in the Obama library? Nothing. Nothing of substance. Let's see if there's anything else on the Obama front. Yes, look at this. Washington Compost. Amid Arab protests, U.S. influence has waned. Wall Street Journal. Turmoil heartens U.S. foes. Wall Street Journal again. U.S. pressure on Mubarak opens a rift with Arab allies. Yes, the Jordanians, the Bahrainians, Saudis, all the rest. I don't know how we're ever going to cut a deal again in the Middle East. May I digress for a minute? I will not be voting for any more Bushes for president. Jeb Bush is being promoted because of his excellent school choice initiatives. I know they're excellent because the legal foundation I had, Landmark Legal Foundation, has been promoting them for decades. But that said, any man who wants to be president who smears law-abiding American citizens simply because they want the border secured and they don't believe in lawless immigration rules is not worthy of being president. If you're going to put down law-abiding American citizens the way his brother did, then he's not serious. So he'll never get my vote. I'm going to say another thing that's going to upset some people. Newt Gingrich supports ethanol. I read what the Wall Street Journal said. I read what he said in response, which I thought was inadequate. Newt Gingrich won't get my vote either. There, I said it. I know. I'm going to get all the emails and attacks. All the back channels. Don't waste your time. I'm not interested. It's like Chris Christie. Oh, Mark, he's good on the unions and he's good on the budget. He's a gun controller, an amnesty guy. He appoints a radical to a judgeship. He's out campaigning for rhinos. Slobbering all over Barack Obama, who's throwing a state dinner for the Red Chinese, who obviously share our universal values. He's weak on cap and trade. The hell is that? That's Mike Castle. That man will never get my vote either. Well, let me put it to you this way. If it's between Obama and, say, an orange juice can, I'll never vote for Obama. What I'm talking about is in the Republican primary. Though there's more. I look at Romney, perfectly nice man, but as much as he tries, that Romney care sticks to him like glue. He can try and shake it off his record, but there's no shaking it. Mark, who do you support? I don't know yet. I see McCain announced that he's not going to be doing any endorsements. Oh, too bad. I've been sitting back waiting for John McCain to tell me who he'd support. You want to know why? Because I'll make damn sure I never vote for that person. We'll be right back.
Mark Levin.
Let me put it this way. By the way, if you notice, I always tell you what I think, and it gets me in trouble a lot of times. If some of these candidates have taken positions in the past that are really bad, and they renounce them, then I can deal with that. But if they continue to promote them, then I can't. You know, when Reagan was governor, he was really, really skeptical about this whole abortion thing. It bothered him a lot. But he signed a bill which he thought was a bill that was essentially aimed at saving the life of women. And then he realized later the ruse aspects of the bill, that it was really a flat-out abortion bill. And he regretted it. And he said he did. And he did. And he spoke out against abortion, and when he became president, he appointed people to office and had certain policies in place that reflected his views. So, I mean, for instance, if Newt, who's a very nice guy, if Newt were to say, when I said that I believed that there must be a quote-unquote green conservatism, I was wrong and I don't believe that today, I would take him at his word. But he hasn't said that. We'll be right back.
Levin, America's Paul Revere. Call him now at 877-381-3811.
Well, a very nice gentleman called me last year, and we wanted to talk to him again this year. Jim Sweeney, former Jets, Seahawks, Steelers offensive lineman, 84-99. Jim, how are you, brother?
I'm doing well, Mr. Levin. How are you?
Good. Call me Mark now. Now, let me ask you this. You're a former Steelers guy. Does that mean you're automatically going to pick the Steelers?
I think so. I mean, last year was a little bit of a tough call. This year it's sort of a no-brainer. I mean, growing up in Pittsburgh, you know, I grew up around the Steelers, and we rooted for them every week except when we played them. And now that I'm no longer a player, I mean, I rooted for the Jets last week. I have to be honest. I wanted to see my former team make it to the show, but it really was a no-lose situation for me. So, yeah, my head and my heart tell me it's the Steelers this year.
All right, now let's go to your head, because I want to know why you think the Steelers.
Well, my head would be a little more comfortable if Marquise Pouncey was playing. This kid's a player now. Only being a rookie, very impressed with him. Love the way he finishes blocks. That's a big loss for the Steelers. But you know what? Doug Legursky filled in all year at all different positions, and he did a good job. And then he didn't do a good job. He did a great job last week against the Jets. So if he doesn't try to do more than what he's capable, I think he's going to have a good game. And what a game to be your first start, a Super Bowl. How many guys can say that?
Well, I know I can't.
I can't either.
Well, you were a damn good player, though. Let me ask you this, Jim. The line out there, and Rush was talking about it today, and others have been talking about it, is, and of course the Steelers are going to deal with it, is that you spread the Steelers' offense out. And
I mean, if you can. I mean, the key to stopping the Steelers is you got to get Roethlisberger on the ground, and he's so strong, and he extends every play, and just when you think he's down, he breaks out of the pack, and, you know, he's always looking downfield to create a play. And those types of guys are dangerous, and you really don't have a defense for that other than getting them on the ground.
Yeah, and I misspoke. I think what they've said is you spread out the Pittsburgh defense because Green Bay has all these great receivers. I don't know how they're going to defend against it. Yeah.
Well, you know what? They had a great shootout last year in Pittsburgh. I think the final score was 36-35, and it was whoever had the ball last won the game. In fact, I think the last play of the game did decide who the winner was. So I anticipate the same type of game Sunday.
These are pretty even teams, though, right? Don't you think? I think so. Maybe I'm wrong.
No, you're right, because there's a great Pittsburgh contingency in Green Bay. Mike McCarthy, the head coach, is from Pittsburgh. Don Capers was a defensive coordinator with the Steelers. Kevin Green's there. Darren Perry, who was a teammate of mine, he's on the defensive staff. So there's a lot of similarities between the clubs. And, Aaron Rodgers is coming into his own, sat behind a great quarterback, learned, but he's his own type of quarterback, too. And,
it looks like he's coming in his own. He's coming in his own exactly at the right time, don't you think?
Yeah, he's really a young guy. I think his is only his 5th year or 6th year in the league. And, he's going to be, the next slew of great quarterbacks for years to come. I mean, we know about the Bradys, we know about the Mannings. Now you have Roethlisberger, and now you have Aaron Rodgers, who are going to be in that mix for the next 7, 8, 9 years.
I'm talking to Jim Sweeney, who was offensive lineman, Jets, Seahawks, Steelers. Let me ask you this, Jim. The fact is, really, Green Bay just got past the Eagles, but for a few missed kicks and an interception at the end. I'm not making excuses. I'm saying they didn't look like an overpowering team in that particular game.
No, they didn't, but, that's why they play the games. Whoever makes the least amount of mistakes usually wins the games. Because really any team in the NFL can beat another team on any given Sunday. That's why they play the games. And they got by the Eagles. They did what they had to do to win. Tough place to play. Went down to Atlanta and dismantled the number 1 seed. Then they went into a Chicago stadium where, it doesn't matter what the records are. Two tough teams. Went in there and did what they had to do to win. Yep. Now they're in the Super Bowl.
Boy, that killing of the Atlanta team was unbelievable. But
yeah, that shocked me. That shocked me a lot. I mean, I have friends who are on the coaching staff down there, and I felt bad for them. But sometimes I think the bye week's a curse. New England lost, Atlanta lost, and they were both number 1 seeds. So to me, I'd rather keep playing. I know it's an extra game, but you don't lose that momentum.
By the way, do you ever watch the UFC fights, or you're not into that?
No, sir, I don't watch those. Those guys are too tough for me to watch. The way they hit each other on TV, it feels like the pain would come through the tube. And
it really does. I'm wincing all the time.
I'd rather watch a hockey game. In fact, I was listening to you, then I went downstairs and watched the Penguins and the Buffalo Sabres were on tonight.
Well, you're a good man, Jim. I appreciate it, brother.
So are you, sir. And my wife wanted to mention that because of you and your book, Rescuing Sprite, we started getting involved in animal rescue. In fact, we have 5 dogs now.
Really?
Yes, we do. And it's all because of the way you inspired us. And we do animal transports, too. We do them from shelter out to Howard County, where they have a great shelter out there where the adoption rate is unbelievable. So that's what I do in my spare time is anytime there's an animal that needs to be rescued, I think of you, I think of Sprite, think of my wife, and put them in a car, and, it's a 6-hour trip, but it's worth it.
Well, Jim, God bless. What's your wife's first name?
My wife's name is Julie, and in fact, we are expecting our first child in May.
Wow.
So
well, that's cool. Congratulations.
Yeah, we'll have another tough Irish Sweeney walking the earth in a few months.
All right, brother. Well, congratulations, and thank her and thank you. That is beautiful. I really mean it.
I appreciate it. Anytime I get a chance to talk to you, it's a treat for me.
Well, it's an honor, Jim. God bless you, man. You take care. Boy, I'll tell you, if we can inspire people to adopt dogs, if you're a cat person, cats, it is the most important thing to me. It really is. And let's see. If Griffin had lived till February 10th, we would have had him 4 years. I tried. He tried, too. He wanted to live. He did everything he could. But it just didn't work out that way. For you UFC fans, and I am a UFC fan. What'd you write here? I can't even read it. We've got, Forrest Griffin versus Rich Franklin. That's a great fight. And Silva versus Belfort. That should be a good fight. Don't you think, Mike? That Belfort is not a pushover. But that Silva's unbelievable. Yeah. But Griffin and Franklin, those guys even look alike. to me. Am I wrong? Do they to you? Somewhat. Yeah, similar. That's tomorrow night, and then the Super Bowl. I mean, that's a hell of a weekend, isn't it? It's unbelievable. All right, let's see here. Let's sneak in a few more calls. Let us go to Michael, Montgomery County, Pennsylvania, the great WABC. That is my home county, Montgomery County, Pennsylvania, the 13th Congressional District, and it's gone to hell. How are you, my friend?
I'm doing well, Mark. Thanks for taking my call.
And what town are you in exactly?
Well, right now I'm over in New Britain in Bucks County. I teach in Montgomery County.
Well, you better not tell me what school system. You may get in trouble. Well, Bucks County's beautiful, too.
It is. They both are, yeah.
How may I help you?
I'm originally from Monmouth County, New Jersey myself, which is also beautiful.
I know exactly where that is. I used to drive around there all the time and drive down to Atlantic City and Ventnor and Margate and all the rest of it.
Is that right?
Salem County. What's your hometown?
Lincroft, New Jersey.
Absolutely. I love all those little towns.
Beautiful, right? Colts Neck and Lincroft right there. Red Bank. But thanks for taking my call, really. I was calling to comment on the Time for Choosing speech that you were playing earlier in the night.
Right.
What I was thinking about that, because I first heard that speech back over the summer.
Yeah.
And when I heard it, I was thinking that it sounds like the ideas that he so effectively articulated in that speech were adopted a lot from the book Conscience of a Conservative by Barry Goldwater.
Well, here's the thing. Reagan at that point in his life was extremely well read on politics and philosophy. So there's no question he would have read Barry Goldwater's book, but he read a lot more. Frederick Bastiat, he had actually started reading Burke, Locke, the founders. So Reagan was really up on this stuff. But obviously he and Goldwater, at least much of their philosophy, was obviously shared. Thanks, Mike. Gotta run, brother. How refreshing was it, ladies and gentlemen, when the House of Representatives opened with a reading of the United States Constitution? And did you notice all the liberal wolves out there howling? Oh, you can't read that. What about this section? Oh, what is this? You're enshrining it? What's going on here? Okay, we're going to swear you in now. Okay, where's my Bible? Do you swear to uphold the Constitution? Yes, I do. I just don't want to read it. Anyway, our elected officials swear to uphold the Constitution. They're supposed to. They have an obligation to thoroughly understand it. They have an obligation to champion it. Otherwise, why swear to uphold it? Well, we the people, we have a duty to uphold it whether they do or not. And if you don't know what the Constitution says, then how do you know what the limits of government are? Let me take it a step further. If you don't uphold or understand what the Declaration of Independence says, then you won't know that you have certain unalienable rights that these people are not free to trample on. Get your free copy of the Constitution and Declaration of Independence in one booklet from levinforhillsdale.com. Levin for Hillsdale.com. Since you listen to my show, I know you love the Declaration and Constitution as much as I do. So get your own copy, keep it on your person, and pull it out as necessary and quote from it. Wave it. Be proud of it. Go to levinforhillsdale.com right now. Get your free copy from Hillsdale College. Defend the Declaration, defend the Constitution with me. levinforhillsdale.com.
Mark Levin.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, the week is coming to an end, and I thought it was crucial to talk at some length about Ronald Reagan with his 100th anniversary of his birthday coming up on Sunday, because that's the kind of president who leads a great nation, not this president who drags it and drags it and drags it down. This, ladies and gentlemen, is for you.
Oh, beautiful, for heroes proved in liberating strife. Who more than self their country loved, and mercy more than life. America, America, make God thy gold refined, till all success be nobleness, and ever again divine. And you know, when I was in school here, oh, beautiful, far spacious skies, far amber waves of grain, far purple mountain majesties, over the fruited plain. But now wait a minute, I'm talking about America, sweet America. You know, God done shed his grace on thee. He crowned thy good. Yes, he did. Heavy brotherhood from sea to shining sea. You know, I wish I had somebody to help me sing this. America, I love you, America. You see, my God, he done shed his grace on thee. And you ought to love him for it, because he crowned my good. He told me he would. Every brotherhood from sea to shining sea. Oh, Lord, I thank you, Lord.
Boom. We'll be right back. Well, sadly, there was a point at which Ronald Reagan had to leave, the end of his presidency. And in his farewell address on January 11, 1989, this is a very short clip, he said the following.
And
At 13. Go.
And I hope we have once again reminded people that man is not free unless government is limited. There's a clear cause and effect here that is as neat and predictable as a law of physics. As government expands, liberty contracts.
And that's something to always remember. Now, some of you listening, not most of you, some of you are liberals, or left of center, or you're not sure. And so when a politician or a group of politicians come up with an idea, government-run health care, or cap and trade, sounds appealing to you. Or if you have a problem in your life and some politician or bureaucrat says they're going to solve it for you. It sounds very appealing. This is the deception of tyranny. They're not going to solve anything for you. Like the president said, as government expands, liberty contracts. One of the reasons today I've played so many of Reagan's clips is because there is not a growing but a subtle, kind of annoying voice, or a small handful of voices out there. The Brooks, Dutats, the Frums, and their ilk. Who, when people speak like this, conservatives, they denounce them, they smear them, they trash them. They want another way. They want to go the way of Richard Nixon, or Gerald Ford, or Nelson Rockefeller, or Colin Powell, or David Gergen. You get the point. That wasn't Reagan. Reagan was bold. You knew where he stood, and you know why he stood where he stood. Happy birthday, Mr. President. The week is officially over. The weekend officially begins. We salute our armed forces, police officers, firefighters, and emergency personnel, and all of you. God bless you. Good night, Spritey. Good night, Griffey. Good night, America.